Let's install VirtualBox. So VirtualBox is available for a bunch of different platforms. It's for running virtual machine software, as I said before. This is the VirtualBox website. So you can see that there's Windows hosts and OS X hosts and Linux distributions and Solaris hosts. If you're taking this course and you use Solaris, just go onto the advanced course. It's fine, I promise. You're not missing much. So Windows hosts, because that's what I'm on here, it's basically going to let me download a thing. The installation on OS X, basically the same. So this is going to take a little bit to download. It's not a super big program. And if you're more comfortable with something else like Hyper-V, by all means use that. It's fine. Figure VirtualBox is sort of the lowest common denominator. Alright, so we've got our installation window here. We're going to do stuff with VirtualBox. Yep, sounds good. It's going to create all the shortcuts and do all this stuff. Who cares? I mean, whatever. I don't know. Just don't pay any attention to it. So I'm going to do terrible things to your machine and install Java and make all this stuff happen. Okay. Whatever. Did you get a driver pop up like this one? That's like, oh, I need to install some device drivers. It's like, device drivers on the host computer? That's how it can map your physical devices. It's pretty cool, really. Yeah, start VirtualBox. All right. You get the VirtualBox window. We're going to do new. I'm going to call this one Debs. Debian 64-bit. I'm going to give it 4096. This doesn't really matter too much. About 4 gigs of RAM. You wouldn't need to give it that much. You know, if you're not going to go through the GUI part of this, because you've already messed around with Linux on the GUI, you don't need that much RAM. But I'm going to install GNOME and some of the GUI desktop environment stuff later in the course, so 4 gigs of RAM is probably fine. Plus, I've got 32 gigs in this system. Now, if your system has less than 8 gig, you'll probably want to pick a smaller number than half your memory. Just saying. We can create a virtual hard disk, so that's totally fine. And we just go with the defaults on this. Dynamically allocated is fine. Dynamically allocated means that it's just going to create a really small file and it'll let it grow up to a certain size, but it's not going to pre-allocate that. So if you say the hard drive can be, 20 gigabytes big or whatever, then the file will start out really small and it will grow up to 20 gigabytes. Whereas if you do fixed size, it'll just go ahead and allocate 20 gigabytes now. We'll give it about 20 gigs. All right, now before we power it on, we're going to go into settings and we're going to do storage, I think. Yeah, and then this thing, yep. So we can hit this and it's like choose virtual optical disk file. And then I got to go to downloads. Then we're going to click start. You should get a pop-up like this. Now when you click on it, you should definitely read this pop-up. So it's telling you about the host key. The host key is defined as right control. So when you click into this and you move your mouse cursor, see how it's kind of trapped in the window? You can't get your mouse cursor out. That's because it's sending it to the virtual machine. Later, there's software you can install in the virtual machine so that when your mouse cursor hits the edge of the virtual machine, it'll send a message to the host and say, hey, the mouse cursor hit the edge of the screen, the host can take over the mouse again. But because we're at an operating system installer, it doesn't know. There's no communication mechanism there. And so what you have to do is use right control in the VirtualBox's case. Now, depending on your virtualization software, sometimes it's like left control alt. You hit both of those at the same time. That's popular in VMware land. Sometimes it's like control shift. Sometimes it's another key combination. But it tells you, and I think this varies on the Mac platform. So the Mac platform, you're going to get a slightly different message there. But yeah, and so right control will let go of it. So when I click, you'll see the mouse cursor disappears. Move it up here to the top. It's like, oh yeah, there's something going on, just so you know. Hit right control and it'll let go of the mouse. So we can just arrow down to graphical install. If you're feeling adventurous, you can totally do the text mode install. Next up is Red Hat. The steps are pretty much the same. Just like before, I want to pick the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I'm not going to bother testing the media. We're just going to install it. I've got to close my messages from VirtualBox in order to get to my message here. I clicked on partitioning. It's just saying, hey, I'm going to automatically do this. I'm just going to hit done. So that's fine. Then we can begin the installation. It wants to set a root password and create a user. So we'll do it just like we did before. Be sure to set something memorable. For your user, you probably do want to check make them an administrator, although if you forget, there's a way out of that. And done. It's like warning, this password is weak. Yes. Yeah, you probably want to choose a strong password, especially if it's going to be on the internet. And now we just wait for the installation to complete. Hey, we've got a login. Look at that. We'll just log in. Make sure that our password works. Yeah, it works. All right, good enough. We'll do that ACPI shutdown thing again. System's powering off. Oh look, we're all powered off immediately. Gotta repeat the process for OpenSUSE. It knows. So with this one, we explicitly have to pick installation, because if we do boot from hard disk, it's not going to work because we haven't set it up on the boot disk yet. So we're going to pick installation. This looks vaguely familiar. The little bars going across, except these are green. OpenSUSE's mascot is a chameleon. So, you know, what does the chameleon say? Red Hat says a red hat. And the experimental version of Red Hat is Fedora. Debian, just a little swirl thing. It's not too ostentatious. Debian's community supported. Red Hat and OpenSUSE, they're commercial. OpenSUSE is very big in Europe and in certain niche industries. Red Hat is a little more American, North American. So you'll run into all three in your career and relatives in the Linux family tree. So English, US, keyboard test if I want to. Yep, license agreement, whatever. Yeah, it's going to just do all this. So this is telling us I'm going to create all of this stuff, create a root volume, create some subvolumes, and do all this. Like, whatever. Don't care. It's fine. For learning purposes in the introductory course, it's fine. We'll talk more about advanced partitioning and things like that in a future course. New York time zones, totally okay. Desktop with KDE Plasma, desktop with GNOME. We'll go with KDE. You'll see GNOME. I feel like you'll see GNOME more often than not. And the server is, of course, text mode, which you're probably going to encounter more in your career, but we'll do KDE Plasma. That's fine. So this, and it's like automatic login. I'm not gonna do automatic login because we don't have automatic login on the other two systems. So I'm gonna leave that unchecked. So this is giving us booting a bootloader type grub2. Remember those magical keywords, and we'll come back to them in a minute. Enable trusted boot. No. Sometimes this is called secure boot in UEFI. Status location, change location, it's like we're going to do MBR. Now your system may say UEFI booting, because MBR is actually on its way out. Because you're using virtual machines, probably MBR. I'll show you UEFI booting on my Fedora 25 system, but this is just inside a VirtualBox to give you an idea of what it's going to be like on your system. So, yep, we're going to do the installation now. That's pretty much it. Alright, the system's going to reboot. I don't even have to click OK. Alright, now notice that it booted from CD, and now it says boot from hard disk. So you may have to go in your virtual machine settings and remember to disconnect the DVD, otherwise you may end up booting off the DVD and not meaning to. So I'm just going to hit boot from hard disk. And now we get our bootloader. So I can do advanced options or start bootloader from a read-only snapshot. That's fine. So we're just going to pick the first option. I hit enter, but it would have timed out on its own. It would have counted down just like the rest. Notice visually it was a little different than the other two operating systems, but basically still the same. Had an option of, regular boot or some advanced options to maybe get me out of a sticky situation if the machine won't boot. It's pretty interesting. Hey, we've got a login screen. Look at that. Look at that. We got some pop-ups telling us about, hey, I know I'm running in a virtual machine. I know I'm running in VirtualBox. And there's guest additions. Guest additions are those little pieces of software I was talking about before, where the virtual machine can talk to the host machine a little bit, where the virtual machine, this computer, sort of knows that it's being virtualized, and it can provide some differences in functionality than it would when it normally runs on bare metal, when it normally runs just on a computer not being virtualized. Those differences in functionality make things a little easier. And there's a lot of stuff under the hood for performance improvement and stuff like that. But remember, one of the differences is this mouse cursor. Look, without me hitting control, the mouse cursor can leave the window there automatically. So that's the type of functionality provided by guest additions. It can also provide video acceleration and a whole bunch of other things. So this is the OpenSUSE KDE Plasma desktop as opposed to GNOME. So like the windowing environment here is completely different, completely separate than the rest of the operating system. And you can totally run Linux without the graphical environment at all. That's an option. In fact, that's really common in servers that you'll run into. So we've got OpenSUSE up and running. We'll come back to that later.